Looks like we're live.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for this Keyfest 2022 session. Today, we're going to talk to you about the evolution of Bitcoin scams. My name is Charlene Fadirepo. I'm the founder of a company called Guidefi. We help Black women with their wealth, and that includes digital wealth. And I'm also a Bitcoin educator. I'll turn it over to my co host, Black Regal, who will tell you about himself.
I'm Black Regal. Been in the space for about 5 years. I'm a crypto community educator, and I'm also the founder of the Regal Liberation, which is a movement to push my people to a higher level of thinking, elevated way of thinking, and just showing everyone what's possible in this space of cryptocurrency as well as others. And I'm also a crypto community educator that works with the Black Bitcoin billionaires.
All right, all right. So I guess let's start this off. We thought it would make a lot of sense to talk to you guys about how Bitcoin scams have changed over time. Then we're going to talk about some of the types of scams we've had in the past. We'll talk more specifically about the room that we run in the Black Bitcoin Billionaires. We'll talk about some scammer stories and then talk about some success stories. And of course, we are leaving some time at the end of this session to do Q&A. So first, let's talk about how Bitcoin scams have changed. So if you kind of dial it back and think about this idea of scams in general, like we've had digital scams for, for several years, right? They started off in the 80s and the 90s. They actually started off with landline phones, then it moved to mobile phones. Then when the internet and email came about, you had scams on the internet and email, and then of course the smartphones. And I think as I think about scams, as technology evolved, it really just expanded the number of places that scams could show up. And so when it comes to these Bitcoin scams, though, you're seeing some of these old world low tech internet scams show up with the Bitcoin flavor. And then when it comes to Bitcoin, you also have some like new and very Bitcoin specific scams. So, when I think about the world of Bitcoin scams, of course, you start off with email phishing scams. So what does that mean? Basically, so you get an email probably about a fraudulent account or a fraudulent bill. There's a number at the end of that email. You call, and somehow they convince you to give up your Bitcoin. So that's one scam that we see quite a bit. Another Bitcoin scam that we see that's pretty common is the fake giveaway, right? So this is a fancy scam where sometimes they use a celebrity, but they'll say, hey, we will take your Bitcoin and double it or triple it. And so all you need to do is go to this website, click this link, and then, of course, usually that link is a link that will steal stuff out of your wallet. But that giveaway scam is they're always proposing to give you something, usually for nothing. And then that turns into a scam. We've seen impersonation scams. So those are the ones that are super big right now. We see people, scammers impersonating celebrities, and also scammers impersonating Bitcoiners. So there are a lot of big names in Bitcoin, huge Bitcoin influencers. Scammers are taking the time to copy accounts on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and really trying to use someone else's celebrity to kind of grab Bitcoin. And then the last thing I'll talk about is the romance scam. And this one is so unfortunate because we see this romance scam affecting huge numbers of women. And really, a scammer comes in, there is some sort of exchange, they're building trust, and somehow they convince you that they're better off managing your Bitcoin than you are, and then you transfer your Bitcoin. But the whole romance scam, it has a terrible twist because you're kind of using the romantic interest or the thought of a romantic interest to really gain trust, build a relationship, and then hopefully take someone's Bitcoin. I'm going to pause and see, Regal, what other scams shall we talk about when it comes to Bitcoin?
I want to talk on I think the most disgusting out of all the scams, right? Or at least to me, are the ones that I've seen that are the most catastrophic. Are those ones that take the time, they build up the trust and everything like that, and those are the ones that take place via like exchanges, impersonating legitimate integral services and custodies, where people have placed their Bitcoin on different servers or custody them on different websites, and those people have vanished with, millions upon millions of dollars of Bitcoin. So I'm gonna just touch on a few of those throughout the conversation.
Yeah, and I think this whole idea of trust is something that we see so much. Typically, no matter if it's a giveaway scam, an impersonation scam, or even an email phishing scam, this theme of building trust with that target is something that we see over and over and over again. And I think that trust can be built by, you know, like you said, continued communication. It can be built by the use of someone's image or personality or profile, or it just could be used, built by a perception of someone that's an expert, right? I've heard of situations where there might be a really legitimate investment group, but
Right,
scammers sit in that group and present themselves as someone that can get you a better deal. So this
right,
idea of trust is so important. And then if you think about the ethos of Bitcoin, right? Like we're encouraging people to be self-sovereign. We're encouraging people to not trust, always verify. Like that's why it's so important for people to understand that trust is the core of a scam. And so if you can just remember that you should not be trusting anybody when it comes to your Bitcoin, that will save you so much heartache and pain as you go forward.
right. And if you think about it, it's like, trust, the trust factor and all of that, like you were talking about. There was a time where Bitcoiners and people who were early adopters in the space, they trusted their computers to hold their Bitcoin, right? And sadly, we learned that that's not a good place to store it from those horror stories of people having their computers obviously hacked and their Bitcoin being cleared off of their hard drives. But initially, a lot of Bitcoiners they could mine from their PC when hash rates were low and everything like that. But it also that level of comfort always leaves the door open for scams or just your guard down in general for things to go haywire. So we've learned that over time as well. Like, and perfect segue into services now like Casa, where you have the multi-signature service to help protect you from those types of things because they get more and more elaborate over time. Well, we've seen scammers as far as, and just touching on some of the things we've seen in this space since we've been educating and helping people in this particular area. We've seen cold storages that were manipulated and sent to people with the information filled out on it, with private keys filled out on it. Like, here's your private keys. You put this in, and you add your Bitcoin to it. Like everyone that knows the space knows, hey, that's been compromised. But someone who is day one coming into the space, and maybe someone who's financially well off, they might not know that and put a lot of Bitcoin on that wallet and just completely get cleared out. So I would definitely just say that it's just key to be mindful and get yourself in a space where you can be educated and refreshed. Because the other thing we talked about, I touched on comfort. The other thing that happens in this space is you get comfortable when you've been here a while. You gotta feel and a grip on how everything works, and transferring and getting things on and off your cold storage and all that stuff is not difficult, and you just get super comfortable. And that's another one of the reasons why we have these rooms. We've had I had one gentleman that came on that had his, I won't say the exchange, but he had his Bitcoin on an exchange, and he left it there. And he was a veteran. He left it there, and he got cleared for like 40,000 in Bitcoin, and that was this year. So comfort is another thing that really can just get us. Like, so we do this type of thing all the time just to keep people fresh and keep them on their toes, because man, these people don't stop and it's ever evolving. So yeah, we just do everything we can to keep people on the cutting edge of what's going on.
Yeah, Black Regal, you bring up a good point. So when we think about scams, we always assume that's the newbies, right? The folks that are
Right.
just wet behind the ears, they just got into the space. What we find, it's not always the new folks. It's a lot of folks, and depending on how you enter kind of the crypto universe, if you don't come in via Bitcoin, if you come in via some of the other DeFi or NFTs, what we find is that many of those folks, they're not using cold storage. They don't have a security protocol in place, and they don't even they're not even thinking about an approach. And just going back to this idea of trust, I think it's important to realize that, again, this Bitcoin cryptocurrency requires a higher level of responsibility. You really just have to be intentional about how you move in your space. And you also have to realize that you are the weakest link. No matter what, you are the weakest link. So act
Right.
accordingly, right? So if you're that person that fumbles with passwords to your email account or your websites, you might need to get a password manager. Like if you're that person that just doesn't have, a lot of, if you're not very diligent in how you organize your affairs, then you probably need to just say, hey, I really need an intentional strategy around how I'm managing the operational security of my Bitcoin, and use a service like Casa where you can have a multi-sig wallet, or just figure out how you're going to manage that. Because, when you are not thoughtful, when you are not focused and not intentional about how you are transferring, how you are protecting, how you're navigating your Bitcoin, or even managing your Bitcoin, it can have disastrous results, disastrous. And we've seen it time and time again. Again, not only the newbies, but some of the folks that have gotten relaxed, they have this all under control. And they, when they started, they had a small amount, but now they have a huge amount and they haven't upgraded their security strategy to match the level of wealth that they have. And it's so important.
Absolutely. So take us through some of the that list you talked about, like some of those phishing scams and romance scams. Some of those things we tend to see
Yeah,
on a weekly basis.
I'll talk about one example that it was really heartbreaking because this actually happened to a really close friend of mine. It was one of their relatives, and it happened this week, right? And so it started off very, 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 very simple. It was an email, right? She got an email and said that the email said that she owed several $1,000s for a washing machine purchase. And of course, this person was very, very diligent about their financial affairs. The first thing she did was scroll down, look at the email. There was a phone number, and she called. So she called and said, hey, I think this is wrong. I don't have, this isn't my charge. How can we fix this? And so over the course of an hour-long conversation, there was an incredible back and forth where that person, the scammer on the phone, convinced her that she needed to download this app that would allow him to better assess whether or not she owed that bill. Now, here's the problem. And she, again, being a very diligent person about her finances, said, great, I'll download the app. Well, that was the first mistake, because that app was actually an app that gave the scammer the remote access of her device. And once that app was downloaded, 80% of the scam was done, because they took over control over her device and they were able to go into her cryptocurrency accounts and drain them. And what was horrible about it is that she watched it happen. She's on the phone with them and she's watching her money being transferred out of her cryptocurrency account time and time again. And so she shared that entire story with me, and it was absolutely heartbreaking, but it is consistent with what we hear in this space. There's a scammer there's some sort of fraudulent some sort of fraudulent issue, you're trying to be diligent to resolve it. And in an effort to do that, you're unfortunately, you're giving that person control over your device. Once you've downloaded that software, once you've clicked that link, malicious link, once you have kind of, downloaded, clicked, or something, when control over your device has been taken, there's really not much anyone can do. And the other part of that is difficult is that when you give someone access to your device, you have a harder case to return those funds, right? So the bank is going to say, well, you gave them access to your device. So how in the world can you make the claim that it was essentially fraud? Now, I think the good news in that situation is that we are making good progress in helping her recover those funds, because that not only did they take funds out of her cryptocurrency account, she actually had a mobile banking account open on her device during this entire transaction. And so they took money out of that account as well. And think about this. This was over the course of 60 minutes. Her crypto account was drained, the cash and the Bitcoin. And then she also had some of her bank account drained, which, and these are the kinds of situations that we hear on a regular basis in the room that Black Regal and I run. And it's just so important that we arm anyone that's in crypto, anyone that has Bitcoin. It's just so important that we are intentional about how we're protecting ourselves and how we are protecting our investments.
Yeah, that's very true. And there's what I love about this space is there's a level of, it's a mindset and a level of responsibility that you can get to, where you just understand that, like, you literally, as far as your Bitcoin is concerned, you can have a DTA attitude, like you can have a don't trust anybody attitude, and that's totally okay, because that's the way it was designed. Like, it doesn't have to require trust from anyone else. I can literally make everything happen in this space that I need to happen without the assist of a third party or middleman, just interacting with Bitcoin and my cold storage. So you also talked about romance scams. Can you touch on some of those? Because I know we do get those as well.
Yeah,
and those are also tough.
Yeah, these are so unfortunate because, what you find is that, so again, just going back to this idea of trust, trust is always a central point in romance scams. And one of the reasons why I spend a lot of time in the scammer space is that we find that women are typically targeted when it comes to scams. And so women, and of course, people of color. And so, these communities are, extremely vulnerable to scams. And particularly when it comes to women, these scammers are really betting on the fact that maybe that woman doesn't feel comfortable in her ability to manage her own finances. And so, in the course of a conversation, in the course of building trust, if there's any kind of inkling of them not feeling confident in their ability to invest, then the scammer typically, uses that and convinces them that they would be a better option or a better choice to manage their money. But we know that just doesn't fit, because in this space, in the Bitcoin space, you have the ability to be your own bank. And that's the beauty of Bitcoin. That is this idea of self-sovereignty. And so it's so important for us to really understand that, but really embrace that and the good and the bad in that, and just decide that you don't need anybody. And just really another point, even when it comes to financial professionals, you have to be so careful, because even if you're using a licensed financial professional that might be completely fluent in the capital markets and stocks and bonds in that world, that same professional might not be fluent in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And so you actually, if you've been spending time in this space, you actually might find that you know more than a financial professional. And so it's so important. You see, when you're on Clubhouse, you see Twitter, many people, they look at their bios, they're traders, they're all these things, and they will try to convince you that they're going to be better than better than managing your wealth. And I would just encourage, especially to women, I would encourage you to push against that theme and really invest in knowledge to make sure that you completely understand how you should be managing and protecting and storing your Bitcoin investments for yourself. And not let someone else do that on your behalf, because there's a level of risk there. And to me, that's a level of risk that is just not worth taking. And just one more thing, when it comes to scams, you see people saying, oh, I got scammed, but it was only a couple dollars. Well, here's the thing, losing even one penny is too much when it comes to scamming, because it is, these are your hardworking Satoshis. And so you don't want to lose any money. If you look at it from a data perspective, the average loss from a cryptocurrency scam is $2,000. So on average in the United States, people are losing $2,000 US dollars per scam. And you just do not want to be on that side. And again, you don't have to go crazy, but you do have to be smart about how you're approaching how to protect yourself. So,
right. And going into like how to protect yourself, I wanted to touch on one of the things I always touch up on in our weekly meetup is having a VPN, having a virtual private network to protect your IP, protect yourself from being tracked, and like all of your transactions, the things that you're doing, especially if you're someone who travels a lot. Like I've been doing a lot of traveling lately. There's always something going on in this space. Please get you a VPN. Like I can't stress it enough. It just lessens the likelihood of you being a successful target for somebody if you're activating your VPN whenever you're whether you're doing your hotel Wi-Fi or even at home, because your data is for sale through your internet service providers as well, so they get data as well. So it's just another way to further protect yourself in this space. And as long as you can be responsible and organized, like the level of protection, you can't take enough measures because you literally are the bank. You are your own bank. And when you take on that attitude and that mindset, you always look for organized but efficient ways to shore up your security and the protection of your asset. What was the next one we were going to touch on? It was another one.
Yeah, on that protection point, I just think it's so important. So, because I think that when we think about protection, we zoom in on Bitcoin, right? We want to protect the investment, and that's important. But there's actually a broader scope of the things you want to protect. And so I want people to think about, like, when you think about what you're protecting, it's three things. One, of course, is going to be your Bitcoin as an investment. Two, it is going to be your PII, your personally identifiable information, right? That information is like gold. So what does that mean? Your name, your birth date, your social security number, your address. All of those bits and pieces of information can identify you on the internet and allow a scammer to create a profile so that they can scam you. The third thing you want to protect is your contacts, right? So many of us are on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on, WhatsApp, or even or Instagram. All of those platforms come with contacts. Those contacts are a gold mine when it comes to scammers. You want to protect your contacts. The number one way to do that is that if someone's coming at you, they're scamming you via email, they're scamming you via direct message, you want to make sure you block those. You want to make sure you block those instances, those requests, because when you block them, you're stopping that communication line between you and the scammer, but you're also stopping that communication line between the scammer and your contacts. And so you really have to make sure you're protecting all of those pieces. And if you're protecting all of those pieces, your information, your referral network, and then of course your Bitcoin, that will help you have a really comprehensive operational security strategy. That's super, super important.
Hey, I wanted to touch on too, like again with the exchanges, right? I mean, all of them literally have probably been hacked at this point. But what I'm seeing is, like, even with there are people that have the idea that they're insured when they lose their Bitcoin on these exchanges, and this is just people that I've had conversation with because I'm in rooms every single day. It's not necessarily going as smoothly as people thought it would when they saw that, hey, my funds are secured, even if I were to lose them or something were to happen. Some of these exchanges are putting the onus back on the people, back on the user, and saying, no, it wasn't a fault on our end. It was a breach of security on your end. You gave up this or that. So it's not going quite how people imagine by holding on these exchanges, thinking that their asset would be safe, only to find out that the security wasn't breached the way the exchange um, decided it should have been breached for them to be able to insure you or get you those funds back. And they're leaving you holding that empty bag. I would say the bag, but it's an empty bag now. So that's another thing to be mindful of with if you're making the choice to not self custody. Self custody to me is the most important thing you could ever do in this space. Um, Last thing I wanted to touch on also was the new social scam that I saw. The potential social scam that I saw, right? Because it's collecting data. So I seen on Instagram, right, in the stories, there's this new collection feature on stories. So you can ask a particular question in the stories, like click this if your birthday is in January, and every people are like clicking it. So then you can, what happens is when you see that one of your friends shares that and they're constantly sharing that, they're clicking on that and adding themselves to it. If I'm a scammer, I can click through and I can see everybody. Like I can see everybody who's in January. I can see all these January birthdays, or I can see all these people's whose mom's name is whatever. You know what I mean? Like that, scammers are going to use that. They're probably already using it, but I can tell you now that is collecting so much personal data. That's something that you want to be aware of for sure if you're operating in this Bitcoin space.
Absolutely. And then another scam that we haven't really talked about is we've seen a lot of these Bitcoin and crypto mining scams. And so, for those scams, it's actually really sad because if and this is why the power of education is so important, right? If you understand what a Bitcoin miner does and you understand the amount, how expensive some of these units are, then when you see an email website about being a Bitcoin miner, then you know that it's a scam. And so, for these Bitcoin mining scams, what you see is like you get an email for this crazy, super sophisticated mining platform where you mine this token. And then when you accumulate X amount of these tokens, then you can use those tokens to mine Bitcoin or something. They always have these ridiculously lucrative and unreasonable guarantees, though 2 times or 3 times or 4 times your money. And it's really, on its face, a really unreasonable proposition, but it is in the name of Bitcoin mining. And you see that over and over again. And in those cases, these scammers are, again, betting you don't understand what a Bitcoin miner is. You don't understand the fact that in any investment, there are no guarantees. So whenever you're seeing any kind of guarantee, it's fake. And, and they're also betting that you're gonna, just say, what, I don't really understand everything, but I'm gonna try it because, hey, it might work. We see so many folks falling for these fake Bitcoin and cryptocurrency mining schemes. These websites are quite slick. Again, now scamming is very lucrative. And so don't think that these operations are shoddy and small. No, many of these scammers are working, in a very organized manner. They have incredibly deceptive websites and platforms that in some cases are even mirrors of your typical cryptocurrency platform or your typical platform. And I just think that recognizing the level of sophistication of some of these scams, is so important for us to think about, because we need to match that level of sophistication with a very specific and intentional operational security strategy to just make sure you're protecting yourself. And that's just so, so important. Well, I know we were going to talk about some success stories. We
Right.
definitely don't want this to be such a negative conversation. I guess I'll start. So, as we run this room every week, and what's been such an encouraging and inspiring aspect of the room is that, not only do we hear scammer stories, but we hear the success stories. We have people come into our rooms and say, "Hey, you know what? Because you teach this room every day, I remember, I was able to not click on that link, or I was able to delete this particular email." So we had someone that come into our room, I guess it was just last week, and she said that her mother was a non-English speaker. So there's an immigrant family, and she said her mother had gotten some sort of Amazon scam or email. And so because she had been in our rooms, and been listening to some of the things that we've been sharing from an educational standpoint, she was able to tell her mother that that Amazon gift card scam that was trying to take her Bitcoin was indeed a scam. And she was able to avoid the heartache and the pain and the financial loss associated by scams. And so that kind of begs the question, or it kind of, makes the point that the number one thing you can do to protect yourself from scams is to arm yourself with good information. And that's why these discussions are so important. And that's why we do this room every week. And that's why just even, having this Keyfest entire 3-day conference that allows investors or Bitcoin investors to focus on security is such an important piece of the puzzle. And it's a piece of the puzzle that actually is very often overlooked. Most people are so focused on price and so focused on hodling, they do not take the time to upgrade and be intentional about their security approach. And it is absolutely the most important thing you can do when you are hodling your Bitcoin.
Totally agree. I would say our biggest success story is the fact that we've created a culture of people, especially those that are directly connected to us, that they know what to look for. They block scammers. They don't entertain unsolicited emails, messages, direct messages. The flashy sign in the window doesn't pull their attention for the most part. And I would say reason being for that, or so much so that we had a scammer actually reach out. I believe that was to you, Charlene. The scammer reached out in the email or the DM and was like, "Yo, like, why are you telling people not to answer my direct messages? Because I can't, like, basically, like, you cutting into my business. Like, it's affecting my business now." Like, we literally had the scammers like mad at us because like we're literally putting some of these guys out of business. So I think that was like one of the biggest testaments to
Yeah.
what we're doing in this space for real, and then just the fact that it's being super effective. Um,
Awesome. Let's go to questions. We have
yeah,
folks
let's go to
in
the
the
Q and
chat.
A.
All right. So let's see. The first one, let's see. Are there any social narratives among the Bitcoin community that you think inadvertently enable scams or work against Bitcoiners' security? That's an interesting question. Um, yeah, it's funny. I'll give you my initial reaction. I actually think that the Bitcoin community, like the whole ethos of Bitcoin is to be your own bank. That is exactly what you need to embrace when you are trying to navigate and invest in Bitcoin. So I think that that ethos is a good thing. But folks need to be intentional about how to operationalize it. So, what do you think, Black Regal? Social narratives that enable scams or work against security.
Um, I would say, and I can't necessarily attribute it to like the Bitcoin community, like as a whole. But I mean, I would say any type of get rich narrative within this space in general whether it be Bitcoin or otherwise, is it always enables scams and works against someone who's accumulating Bitcoin in their security. Your greed will always work against your security, because once that convinces you otherwise, once your greed takes over your logic, then you're vulnerable. But I would say anything that's in the realm of get rich quick or flip or all any of this other stuff that we see on a regular basis, I would say those types of things are detrimental. Now there are some people who are phenomenal traders, phenomenal at all of that type of stuff. I take nothing away from them, but that's not your everyday person that can do that. So I would say maybe in that aspect. And it looks like we have another question. What is the number one thing that anyone can do today to prevent Bitcoin scams? I would say,
I,
um,
I know my answer.
I would say the most basic is, he said one thing: I would not answer any unsolicited messages. Any unsolicited messages, email, whether it be emails, you didn't send any, you didn't submit any information and you're getting random stuff in your email, DMs, none of that. I never answer or entertain unsolicited messages. And
Got
that's,
it.
yeah.
My answer, so the number one thing I would suggest you do to avoid and prevent Bitcoin scams is make sure you are moving your Bitcoin off the exchange. There is a very false perception that your exchange is safe. It's not. It's actually one of the least safe places for your Bitcoin to be. Now, when you purchase your Bitcoin, that's great, but you absolutely need to move it off the exchange, hopefully to a multi-sig wallet like Casa. But you cannot store your Bitcoin on the exchange. There's so many cases of couples and folks that just assume that because it was on a huge high volume very popular crypto exchange that investment was safe. And what we find is that exchanges get hacked every day, all of them. And so, not one exchange is not better than the other. You have to assume that no exchange is a safe place for your Bitcoin. Once you purchase it, once you have kind of your HODL stock, you need to prepare to transfer that off the exchange and into a cold storage wallet. That is the number one thing you can do to prevent Bitcoin scams for sure.
Absolutely. Are you guys seeing scams that are more targeted to one group or groups over others, or is it more cast a wide net scams to see who they can grab? You wanna start?
Yeah, I listen, I'm seeing scams that are targeting women, and I see scams that are targeting the Black community. Those are two very vulnerable communities, and we see it, and I hear about it quite a bit. And I think that's why it's so important. Education is such a huge component in this industry, and just ensuring that people get the education, but also know how to apply it. They're two pieces of that puzzle, and I think it's so important. So yeah, scammers are absolutely targeting vulnerable communities, and they're even not only are they targeting communities, they're targeting communities with certain scams. We talked about the romance scam. Many of those romance scams happen to middle-aged women.
Single
Um,
woman,
you know,
yeah.
Single women, middle-aged women, women that are showing up on dating sites, women that are showing up in places that you would expect them to be, and looking for love or companionship, and then it turns into a romance scam. So yeah, we see that scammers are being super sophisticated in terms of how they are finding who they are targeting. So that's a
And
great.
I wanted to point out too, like these are literally not made up scenarios. These are
Mhm.
actual conversations we've had. So a romance scam specifically, that I remember was a single young lady that, she was speaking with the gentleman. I don't know if you remember this. She was speaking with the gentleman for a few weeks or whatnot, and he on through, I think, want to say it was like WhatsApp or something like that, and they had kind of built up a relationship and conversation and rapport, and it had kind of got almost to, or I think maybe it was even at like maybe they called themselves dating or in some type of relationship, and he asked for money or Bitcoin or something like that, and she sent it to him. And like, I think it was like another week too. He came up with this, dire circumstance and asked for more, and she gave it to him, and then he like vanished or something of that nature. So these are really things that happen, and I want to also take a moment to appreciate all the people who actually come up and share these stories, um, because they really help open the eyes of a lot of people in these rooms, in that space that actually come. So like them, there's actually a lot of people that come up out of the goodness of their heart and actually share these stories, and they help a whole lot of people open their eyes because they realize we go over the scenarios and we go over the securities and the VPNs, but it's another thing when you hear the other side of what can happen. No, this actually happened, and this is the actual person, and they're heartbreak broken, but they care enough about other people to actually come up and share with others. So I absolutely appreciate our audience for that as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, it's one thing to read about a scam in a newspaper. It's another thing when it's real and you
Right.
actually can listen to kind of the frustration and the pain and the disappointment that usually surrounds that experience. And so, yeah, we always appreciate the facts that the folks that are courageous enough to share their stories, because it helps our community get smarter, and it helps all of us kind of adjust. As these scammers get more sophisticated, we can get more sophisticated as well.
Absolutely. What should someone do once they realize they have been scammed? What steps should they take? Man,
Yeah. Take a deep breath.
that's a yeah. Take a deep breath. That's a hard one.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, that's a tough one. Do you got something for that
Yeah,
one?
so it all depends on how the scam happened, right? And
Right.
so first step is try to retrace your steps, because that will help determine what you need to do. For example, and the scammer example that I talked about earlier, where you had someone that had that email, it was an email phishing scam. She called a number, she downloaded this remote access um, app. That was the key to that scam. So my advice to her when we spoke, I said, first things first, we need to delete that app. Then we need to look at your device because we need to understand what else was at risk. And so, so the first thing you want to do is try to understand how the scam happened, identify the areas of risk associated with that scam. Because if they have access to your device and other pieces of information, then you might need to kind of adjust. So I suggested that she delete that app. We talked about changing her passwords for the other devices on her phone, and then most importantly, so that's kind of the defense strategy to kind of ring fence the risk associated with the scam. And then the offensive is, how are you moving forward? Is your stuff on the exchange? Have you transferred to a multi-sig wallet? Are you using a VPN like Black
Right.
Regal has suggested? What email service are you using? Is it a secure email service? And so you really have to tailor your response to the scam to how the scam happened. And just make sure you have people around you that can help you sort through it. And also just recognize that there is an emotional component to scamming, and just make sure you can sit with and manage that part as well. I think it's so important for people that have been scammed, that you need to kind of push through and heal, and just consider that as a part of the process as well. But I do think that's a good question.
Absolutely. And so the next one we have is, with Bitcoin and ETH high network fees, it's expensive to move cryptos to wallets for small amounts. Seems exchanges are, I would say, predatory on small investors. Um, I would say what we typically, I'll tell you what the practice is anyway. Um, we typically accumulate maybe an amount we're comfortable with, but starting to get uncomfortable with on the exchange. So maybe like accumulating like $100 or $200, and then we transfer that to negate so many of the fees or anything like that. Because if you're transferring $10 and four of them get eaten up in fees, that's 40% of your investment every time you put $10 in. So yeah, we want to negate that. So the way to do that is to maybe move it after you've had like $10 or 200, I mean, $100 to $200 or something like that in Bitcoin. ETH, I can't help you with. God bless you, heaven smile on you, and pray the network services are not congested at that time. That's all I got for you.
I agree. I don't have it. Yeah, I agree. I don't know anything about that world.
Yeah, that's we ain't even gonna go there. But yeah, with Bitcoin,
Yeah.
um, the other the other cool thing that's happening with Bitcoin though is the Lightning Network, which actually allows you to navigate and do transactions on the layer 2 function, which is Lightning, at very low cost. So that's very efficient in sending and receiving Bitcoin through Lightning as well. So I just wanted to add that little piece. All right, what exchanges can you recommend for U.S. residents? Man.
Listen, here's the thing. I'm not going to name exchanges, but this is what I will say. Not every exchange is the same. And you
Right.
really need to understand your needs. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's some people that are going to kind of be casual Bitcoin purchasers, in small amounts. So if that is you, there are going to be some exchanges that are perfect for that profile. There are other folks that want to be Bitcoin traders. Okay. And if you want to be a trader, then you need an exchange that has the flexibility and functionality of a trading platform. So you want to look at those features. And then still other Bitcoiners are going to have large amounts of of Bitcoin purchases. And so if that's you, you want to make sure that you are with an exchange that has the features and the pricing that is commensurate with the level of use. And so that's what I would say. Rather than naming exchanges, I would just say be really thoughtful about who you are as a Bitcoin hodler, the kinds of transactions that you're going to be making, and make sure that your exchange can meet your short-term and then long-term expectations for use. One more thing, customer service. Please, please, please.
Right.
Please. The customer service functions and Bitcoin exchanges or crypto exchanges are evolving. I'll say it that way. Not every exchange has a great customer service functionality. There is nothing more frustrating than getting an email when you need to talk to somebody, or just not having the level of responsiveness from a cryptocurrency exchange that you have been a customer of. And so I would encourage people, begin with the end in mind. Check out their customer service functions, check out the community. What does the community think about that exchange? And let that help you decide what is most important and what exchange you want to attach yourself to, because they are all very different and they're not created equal. And you really need to do your research before you go through the process of being KYC'd or registered. KYC means know your customer, but register, that's a process to register with an exchange. You really need to know kind of who you're being connected with and what they can do for you before you say yes to an exchange.
Me personally, I would say not then I'm not we may not look at it like an exchange per se, like the rest, but I would say the most efficient one that we've had in our communities, especially BBB, and since we've been doing this, has been Cash App, and that's for buying Bitcoin, but like that's been the most effective. Like we've been able to send Sats to people. Like we've been sending Sats to people for the last year, and it's been extremely easy through Cash App, and people have been able to send directly to self-storage via Cash App. So um, I would say Cash App has been the easiest because it's something, for one, it's something in our community that we typically already have on our phones anyway. So there's really not, and the familiarity with it is there, and so it's just the added step of purchasing Bitcoin, which I think the design and the UX on that is pretty nice. So I would say Cash App.
Got it. So here's a really great question that came in the chat. So I know we're kind of getting to the end of our session, but I definitely want to cover this. So what's the best way to verify someone is not a scammer when you only know them virtually? This is a great question. And so um, I'll give you my thoughts. So first of all, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult process because most scammers, the most sophisticated ones, are very very detail oriented. But I would try the triangulation approach. And so when you only know somebody virtually, you need to check them out on multiple platforms. So if you know them on Telegram, great. Check them out on LinkedIn. Check them out on Twitter. Check them out on Instagram. A lot of times your second rate scammers, there's going to be some inconsistencies as you look at them on various platforms. Another thing you could do is ask to actually talk to them on video. A lot of scammers don't want to talk to you on video. And if there's any reservations about somebody talking to you on video, let me tell you, they're probably a scammer, because real people, unless you have someone that's kind of noticeably anonymous in the Bitcoin community, so that's kind of a separate person, but real people will be happy to demonstrate that they're a real person. So if you're concerned, say, hey, can we get on a Zoom call? I bet you if it's a scammer, they will come up with all kinds of reasons to not be on a Zoom call with you, and they'll keep texting. And so I would say get on with them face to face. And absolutely do that. And then the last thing is, if they are someone that's offering a service or a service or a product, I would ask to speak to someone that has used it. Now, of course, they could get their friend to do that, but a lot of times it's really, really hard to have a number of different people. If it's some sort of investment type person, ask for 3 referrals. Hey, I want to talk to 3 people that have provided this service for you. Can I talk to them all? And if you do all of that due diligence, you've talked to them face to face, you have triangulated their presence on the internet, and you see no inconsistencies, you might be dealing with a real person. But even if you're doing all that, you still have to be very, very careful. And I would just encourage you, when it comes to someone trying to manage your Bitcoin, I would encourage you to think about doing it yourself. Absolutely.
That's no go. Totally agree. I would totally agree with that. Getting to know someone online, or how do you know someone's not a scam? How do you know what is it? What's the best way to verify
Yeah, to
someone
know
is
someone's
not
not
a
a scammer
scammer
if you only know them
when
virtually.
you
Yeah.
only know them virtually? Stop knowing them virtually, like know them in person, or know them like Charlene said, over a phone call, and all those different things. Like if you are having in those questions in mind already before you even get to a physical conversation or interaction, I just wouldn't even carry it any further. You know what I mean? Like if you had to ask, like, is this person a scammer? Like I wouldn't even take it to. I mean, I'd be cautious about even taking it further, because, like, man, that's I'll tell you how I meet people online organically that I don't know, right? I watch how they interact with other people that I already know. And I watch how they interact with others, so on and so forth. So, kind of like the same approach Charlene was alluding to, like just kind of triangulating. Like, I don't even sometimes have tons of conversations with people right off. I might keep it like short until I get to know people, because like I can be kind of standoffish at times if I don't know anyone at all. If I don't know someone at all and nobody in my network knows them, I'm very cautious about taking in conversations and stuff like that. So that's something I would encourage you to do, is to watch how someone interacts with others as well. See what they're saying about those persons. They might not have the best social currency, or they might literally be a good person. So I think that's one of the best ways to do that.
Absolutely.
Charlene, it's been an awesome time.
It has been awesome. We've reached the end of our time frame. So, yeah, so I'm excited that you guys are able to join us for our evolution of the Bitcoin scam talk. Hope that this has been helpful. Man, closing comments, I would just say, the beauty of Bitcoin is that it allows you to be your own bank, and that comes with the level of financial responsibility. So please, I encourage you to be intentional about how you engage and how you move in this space. Use common sense practices, and just remember to protect your investment, your data, and your contacts. And if you do those things, you will be ready to be a very safe Bitcoin hodler or investor.
And I appreciate all of you guys who have coming out or coming to your laptop or your cell phone to listen to us on this afternoon. Big shout out to Keyfest 22 for having us. It's been a
Absolutely.
pleasure. And Charlene, as always, it's a pleasure. And we thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for your wonderful questions. And we look forward to hopefully joining you sometime next year.